Will Davis seemed like a guy caught in a whirlwind of life's misfortunes and hard lessons. That afternoon, he was having lunch with his parents at a cozy restaurant and decided it was time to introduce his girlfriend Jill. Jill shared the exciting news that she had landed a job at a major company, instantly lighting up Roger and his wife's faces. Roger, however, seized the moment to push his son toward ambition, encouraging Will to aspire for better than his low-paying internship as an editor, a job that barely covered his bills. Roger reminded Will that despite being an adult, he still relied on monthly handouts, and he wasn't fond of it. Before leaving, Roger handed him his final allowance, stating this was the last of it, and Will needed to start earning his own way. The next morning at their shared rented house, Jill's excitement quickly turned to disbelief as she spotted Will showing off a new TV he had just purchased. Proud as could be, Will explained he'd spent his last allowance on the television, confident that he could simply ask for more money if needed. He brushed off his father's words, convinced it was just a bluff. Jill was left speechless, unsure of what to even say. Their household included an eclectic mix of roommates: Ethan, a laid-back programmer; Luke, who was between jobs; and Charlie, an elementary school teacher with a strong love for alcohol. Though they all shared expenses, financial instability hung thick in the air. Things only got worse for Will that afternoon when his boss dropped the hammer, letting him know the company was on the brink of bankruptcy and all interns had to be let go. Will, stunned and helpless, lost his only source of income in an instant. That same night, Will scoured the internet for job postings and landed a gig as a motel manager. Feeling optimistic, he started the job immediately. Things seemed to be going smoothly until disaster struck. A male guest checked into a room during Will's shift, and although the man appeared normal by morning, he was being arrested by police for conducting a drug deal in the room. The incident cost Will his job, once again fired for the second time in just a few weeks. Desperate for money, Will turned to his father for help, hoping to lean on Roger like he had in the past. But Roger had bad news of his own. Having recently been fired, Roger admitted he was struggling to make ends meet himself and couldn't spare a dime. For Will, now facing his own financial hardships, Roger's support had run dry. Amid the chaos, Luke invited the housemates out for a celebratory night at the bar, eager to mark his first job offer while the others were partying it up. Will sat quietly, simply there to grab some food and take his mind off his troubles. The next day, Will found himself confiding in Jill during a visit to a clothing store. He shared his dream of borrowing money from the bank to kickstart an advertising business. Jill, however, was less than thrilled, not because she didn't support him, but because she felt the timing couldn't be worse. She wanted Will to prioritize finding stable employment before diving into risky ventures. Their conversation turned into an argument with Jill, warning that if he continued to chase the business idea, she might reconsider their relationship. Ultimately, Will relented, promising to shift focus toward finding another job. Meanwhile, Roger was at a cafe trying to mask his own struggles when his wife called. He painted a picture of normally, claiming he was busy at work. The truth, however, remained hidden. Roger hadn't yet revealed that he had lost his job. The cracks in their lives were growing deeper, with each of them navigating their own challenges in silence and resilience. On the other hand, Charlie seemed to be riding a wave of change in his teaching career. During a regular day in his chemistry class, another teacher popped in with an offer that Charlie couldn't refuse. He proposed a switch to become a sports teacher, sweetening the deal with an additional $100 per weekend salary. Wasting no time, Charlie jumped at the chance. Meanwhile, Will got a glimmer of hope amidst his struggles. 2 days later, he received a call for an interview at a major company, but Will's lack of focus nearly cost him the opportunity. During the interview, instead of engaging, he was preoccupied with his cell phone, a move that almost got him kicked out. However, when he showcased a video advertisement he had edited, the HR Rep was blown away by his skills, sparing him from rejection the next day brought another moment of desperation with his finances drained. Will had no choice but to sell the TV he had proudly purchased not long ago. Just as the buyer was leaving with his TV, Will received thrilling news that he had been hired as a video editor with a whopping salary of $26,000 per month. Overwhelmed with excitement, he dashed after the TV buyer, pleading to get his precious TV back. A week into his new job, Will experienced his first meeting with the higher-ups of the company. Though he'd expected it to be a casual affair, he quickly learned otherwise. Instead of dressing in formal attire, he showed up in relaxed casual clothes as he presented his video edits. He faced sharp criticism from the deputy director, Catherine. She handed him a guidebook for creating advertisements and sternly told him to follow its rules rather than producing careless work. On top of that, she reprimanded him for his appearance, stressing the importance of dressing neatly and professionally in accordance with company standards. Catherine issued a warning: if he didn't clean up his act within the month, he'd be fired. Feeling humiliated, Will sought solace during lunch at a cafe, where he ran into his dad, Roger. Unbeknownst to his wife, Roger had been hanging out at the cafe daily pretending to work. Will vented about Catherine's criticism, hoping for sympathy. Instead, Roger sided with Catherine, reinforcing her advice and adding his own. He told Will to be grateful for the opportunity he had, reminding him how difficult landing a job was, especially for someone like Roger, whose age made him less desirable to employers. Roger revealed that he'd even dyed his hair and beard to appear younger, which struck a nerve with Will. Offended, Will abruptly left, unable to handle his father's remarks. Over at Luke's office, things took a quirky turn. On his very first day, the boss initiated him into the workplace with a peculiar ritual. Luke was forced to chug an unbearably bitter drink in front of the entire team, a tradition for every new hire. He eventually emptied the glass, only to spray the contents he had just chugged down to his friends that night. Will paid a visit to Jill at her apartment. Since landing her job at a major company, Jill had moved out of the shared house and into her own place near her office. Will vented about Catherine's scolding earlier that day as his girlfriend Jill encouraged him to see things differently. She pointed out that Catherine's advice about appearance was spot on, saying how he presented himself at work matters. She explained that while casual clothes were fine at home, professionalism earned respect in the workplace. Her words resonated, and Will began taking her advice seriously, gradually refining his appearance to match his office's standards. A month later, Will surprised his father by inviting him out for lunch. As they finished their meal, Will insisted on paying a milestone moment as he treated his father for the first time. Roger, visibly impressed by Will's transformation, acknowledged the maturity his son had developed. Will took the opportunity to apologize for the mistakes he'd made in the past, admitting he hadn't always listened to his father's advice. To further show his appreciation, Will invited Roger to his office. He had a plan in mind to create a job application video for his father. Midway through the recording, Roger grew nervous and asked Will to stop. His emotions bubbled to the surface as he shared his struggles since being fired, lamenting how unfair it was after years of being a loyal and model employee. Despite his disappointment, he revealed he still wished he could contribute to the company. As Roger poured out his feelings, Will quietly continued recording, capturing his father's sincerity and resilience. Ethan had a knack for shaking things up in the most unconventional ways. One afternoon, using a tracking app he developed, he followed a company boss all the way to the restroom in an undeniably awkward moment. Ethan barged in mid-business and pitched his creation. He explained that his app was leagues ahead of other tracking software, boasting unbeatable accuracy. After some tense, awkward negotiations, the boss agreed to buy Ethan's application, leaving him triumphant, if not a little infamous. Meanwhile, the next day at the office, Will's hard work was finally paying off. Catherine praised his growing expertise in video editing and hinted at big changes ahead. She shared the news that the director would soon retire and she was set to be promoted to the coveted position. Teasingly, Catherine told Will that if he kept up the good work, she'd consider promoting him to deputy director, a position that could transform his career. That night, while working overtime, exhaustion got the better of Will. In his tired state, he accidentally uploaded one of his old advertisement videos to YouTube. Initially unaware of his mistake, he got a call from Ethan in the middle of the night. Ethan, who had stumbled across the video, excitedly told Will it had skyrocketed to the #1 trending spot on YouTube. When Will checked and saw the viral success for himself, he couldn't contain his joy, letting out a victorious scream. The success opened new doors for Will. The next day, he was approached by Lon, a businessman eager to collaborate. Lon offered Will a spot as an advertisement maker for his fledgling company, not as an employee, but as part of a partnership. The profit sharing was modest, only 20%, but the freedom to create videos without restrictions appealed to Will. He was intrigued by the opportunity to work on his own terms. Later that evening, Will headed to Jill's apartment, excited to share the news of Lon's offer, but his plans took a turn when he found Jill crying in the corner of her room. When he asked what was wrong, she revealed that she had been fired just as she'd been planning to take out an installment for their dream house. The news hit Will hard, and he decided to hold back on mentioning Lon's offer. Instead, he assured Jill that he was on track to be promoted and invited her to move back into his rented house until she found a new job. Reluctantly, Jill agreed. While Will faced challenges in the office, Roger grappled with his own frustrations. At the cafe, he confided in the waitress about his struggles despite applying to countless companies. He hadn't received any callbacks. At his wit's end, he declared his plan to storm one of the companies and demand a meeting with HR. Upon seeing Roger's tweet about his drastic plan, Will knew he had to intervene. He quickly called Luke and enlisted him to help get to Roger before things spiraled out of control. Grabbing the CD of the job application video he had edited for Roger, Will gathered his friends Luke, Ethan, and Charlie and set off to stop his dad at the company building. The group found Roger being chased out by security after attempting to barge in. Embarrassed, Will apologized profusely to the guards and tried to convince Roger to leave, but when the HR unexpectedly passed by, Roger pleaded for help. Will and his friends stepped in, and together they diverted the security, giving Roger a chance to get into the building. Inside, Roger introduced himself to the HR manager and handed over the CD containing his job application video. Though he didn't know the exact contents, Roger trusted his son's editing skills. His sincerity and effort moved the HR manager, who agreed to interview him. When Roger emerged from the building, he was beaming with pride. He announced to Will and his friends, who were tied up in security's ropes, that he had landed the job and would start the very next day. The group burst into cheers, thrilled by the news. Will returned to the office feeling accomplished, but the atmosphere was tense. Many employees had been fired, and Catherine explained the reason. Having officially taken over as the new director, she had immediately cleaned house, terminating anyone who wasn't up to par. She handed Will a new contract, informing him of his promotion to deputy director and his doubled salary. Though Will was ecstatic about the financial leap, he wasn't thrilled about being under Catherine's strict orders. Yet for the sake of Jill and their future, he resolved to give it his all and prove his worth. That night, back at the shared rented house, Jill reached her limit. The messy state of the place pushed her to voice her frustration. Will, ever the optimist, tried to ease her worries, promising that once he received a bonus, he'd buy a small apartment just for the two of them. His attempt at reassurance brought a brief moment of calm. A few days later, Will brought Jill along to his office Christmas party. Among the festive chatter and mingling, the couple had an encounter with Catherine. Jill noticed how Will forced himself to stay polite and composed even though it was clear he was uncomfortable in her presence. It was in that moment that Jill had a revelation. Will was enduring this job not for himself, but for her to build their shared future. The realization hit her hard when Catherine stepped away. Jill turned to Will with an apology that carried genuine weight. Then, in a bold move, she tore up his new work contract. Right on the spot, she told him she'd stand behind him fully if he wanted to chase his dream of starting his own advertising company. Will was overjoyed. Without missing a beat, he went to find Catherine laying it all on the table. He shared his frustrations and officially resigned, leaving the office with Jill hand in hand, feeling lighter and more hopeful than he had in months. As time passed, life took a turn for the better for everyone in Will's circle. Ethan, Charlie, Luke, and Roger were thriving in their respective careers. Jill found a new job, reigniting her own ambitions. Meanwhile, Will was quietly building his future. One afternoon, he met with Lon to present a fresh advertising video he'd created. He then slid his business card across the table, sharing the news that he had officially opened his own advertising company. Will proposed that Lon become his first client, emphasizing the creative partnership they could build. Lon didn't hesitate. He agreed on the spot. Though Will's business was just getting off the ground, it was everything he had dreamed of. For the first time, he felt truly aligned with his passion. With Jill's unwavering support and his own determination, he was ready to pour his heart and soul into his work, finally living the life he had always envisioned.